Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for On the Money, presented by Embassy National Bank.
You know, you can't see under the table, but I'm actually tapping my foot. That's the only open of all the shows we have here on Business Radio X where I actually tap my foot to the music. Welcome to On the Money. I am not Joe Moss. I am Mike Sammond, and we are turning the tables. Normally the host is Joe Moss, but the hunter is going to be the hunted today. We're going to interview Joe Moss about the show and about Embassy National Bank. Welcome to On the Money. This is the #1 small business show on Business Radio X. It's presented by Embassy National Bank. Embassy National Bank is a nationally chartered financial institution whose deposits are insured by the FDIC. On this show, we discuss topics designed to help small businesses succeed because at Embassy National Bank, they are proud and we are proud of how to help small businesses. Joe Moss, the president of Embassy National Bank and typically the host of the show, is the guest. And Joe, this was your idea. You came up with this about a month or so ago. Why did you decide that maybe I should interview you?
Well, you know, we've done, how many shows have we done?
60, 70?
And I've talked to so many good small business leaders that I thought it might be time to kind of sit back and reflect on those and maybe tell people what I think I've heard that was very important that can help them out.
Okay, and also learn a little bit about the guy that asks the questions all the time.
Yeah.
And that is you.
I like being behind the microphone and being somewhat unknown, but I guess sometimes you do have to come out a little bit, right?
Yep. Well, we'll talk about some of your shows, some of maybe your favorite shows, some of the things that you've learned that can really help small business leaders out there. But let's kind of go back to step one. Tell us about your background and why you decided to have On the Money and do the show on Business Radio X.
Well, on July 5th of this year, I will celebrate my 40th year being involved in what I call the financial management business, which includes banking, and I've been employed by banks or running banks for 20 of the 40 years, and then helping banks as a consultant, and then other small businesses with financing for the other 20 years. So 40 years in the business, and at Embassy National Bank, as you know, I was on one of the shows, and I thought, you know, sometimes I heard some of the shows, and it tends to be about the show's sponsor. And I thought about doing that for Embassy, but I thought, how many shows can I do that? I mean, I can't talk about Embassy National Bank every week, so what could we do? I'm a big believer in trying to educate our clients, and so I thought, well, maybe it'd be good to just moderate a show and bring in different experts, talk to them about things that they do, and how they could help, their talents could possibly help small business.
And you're kind of helping your own clientele because a lot of your customers and clients at Embassy are small businesses.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I see what they go through every day, and I see the challenges that they have, and plus it gives me a chance to help another small business come in here and also publicize themselves.
All right, Joe, here's some information that you've provided about Embassy. Let me read this to give you a little more background. Embassy National Bank was chartered as a community bank designed to fill the financial needs of the South Asian community right here in Metro Atlanta. After a slow start, Embassy now lends throughout the Southeast and has expanded its deposit territory along the East Coast. Embassy also originated the podcast, of course, the one we're on now, On the Money, produced and broadcast here on Business Radio X. Through the podcast, Embassy attempts to educate the small business community on relevant topics. So what does Embassy know about small business?
Well, we were chartered. Our shareholders are all small business people that have owned their started and own, and some have done extremely well as an entrepreneur and creating and running small businesses. And they thought that chartering a bank that would help their community would be a good thing for them to do. So what do we know about small business? Well, we were our shareholders are small business people. Our directors are small business people. I, in fact, ran a small business for a number of years. So we know exactly what the small business person is going through, and we try to help them out.
Something I know you're real proud of, because you've mentioned it a few times on the show, is when times were tough and a lot of banks weren't able to hold their heads above water, you guys were able to. You received no bailout money.
Yeah, we worked real hard, and we got started in '07, and we made the typical mistakes that a small bank or startup bank would make. But we were able to recover from all that, and we had a choice of going after what was called the TARP money. And we said, no, we didn't want to go that route. Turns out to be a smart decision, because there are banks out there that still haven't paid back their TARP money, and they're getting a lot of pressure to do so. But on the other side, we weren't profitable enough to be chosen as a bank to help take over failed banks. So we were right there in the middle, and we've been happy with that. And I think that experience qualifies us even more to help a small business person, because we didn't get any bailout money. We're a small business ourselves, and we really had to tighten up our belts and get through it.
Over the last couple of years, you've spoken to dozens and dozens of business experts in a variety of fields related to small business. In your time doing the show, what do you believe, what have you seen as the most relevant issues that face small businesses today?
Well, I think the overall culture and the way we're starting to think of small business, unfortunately, is not what it used to be. I think from what I think it all started a little bit with the comment, "You didn't build that," as we all recall from a recent election, and that really hit home with me, because I see people every day who decide they want to open up a small business. They go out and borrow money. They put their houses on the line. They put their personal guarantees on the line. Everything's on the line. They invest whatever money they have in savings, and they struggle through it. And I don't think the small business person typically gets the respect that it deserves, because they do take a lot of risk. They are the backbone of our economy. They are the biggest job creator. But yet we want to somehow diminish that, and it really bothers me when I hear talk like that.
Again, all the times that you've talked to these folks, what are maybe a couple things that you've taken away from talking to these experts? Maybe when you started this podcast a couple years ago, didn't really think about it, and now it's like, maybe a couple things you've learned over the last 2 years.
And I've learned a lot. In fact, when I had my small business, and I can tell you now some of the things that I did wrong.
You probably wish you had podcasts like this to listen to back then.
Correct. And I guess the biggest thing is that when you typically you start a small business because you're really good at something. And that'll get you through about the first year. But at some point, you've got to leverage yourself, and you've got to stop doing what you were good at that got you into that small business, and you got to back away and learn how to run a small business and bring in people that can carry forth your talent that you use to get the business going in the first place. And that's probably the biggest thing that I've heard in terms of the successful small business person, that they can come in, they get it cranked up, but then they realize, wait a minute, I got a business to run here, and they back away from the day-to-day things, and then they start thinking about planning, start thinking, where do I want to be a couple of years from now, and all those thoughts, and those are the guys that end up being real successful.
You kind of answered it earlier, and I was thinking about, small businesses, are they relevant today? There's no question about it. I think they're the backbone of every community.
Well, they are, and I think we need to go out of our way to support them. For example, I find myself going to Ace Hardware instead of Home Depot. The Ace Hardware is owned by a guy that came out of Roswell. He had to pay the franchise fee, had to buy the shopping center that he's in. He's probably in that thing for $2 million. Everything's on the line. And I might end up paying a little bit more, but in the long run, I think I'm supporting my community a little bit.
You mentioned small business. Embassy National Bank is a small business. You got all the big banks here, but you're a community bank. What's it like being a community bank in today's world?
There's an obligation that comes with that. We have to try to be very careful to spend some of our marketing dollars into those associations and part of the community that really help the community. So, as you know, last year we were the chair for the American Diabetes Fund Drive. The South Asian community has a high incident of diabetes, and that was very well received. And it's a very, very silent killer. It's kind of taken over blood pressure, which used to be called the silent killer. We also help with a lot of churches in the community, and I think it's very important that the community bank understands that. And I don't necessarily like the phrase "give back." I think I do like the phrase "investing in the community," and that's what we try to do.
Well, Embassy does that with the show as far as giving back and supporting the business community. Are you kind of surprised that, and not to beat up on the big banks or some of the competitors out there, but are you surprised that some of the bigger institutions don't do what you're doing here?
Yeah, I am surprised that they don't, and I don't know why. I used to work for a big bank, but the bank that I worked with was very community oriented, and so we did a lot of things. But in today's world, everybody's trying to get an edge, and either the big banks are too bureaucratic, or they're afraid of the compliance issues, or whatever. But I think they're missing an opportunity like this. If you look at us, I mean, Embassy National Bank is just a one-office branch over in Lawrenceville, but yet, this show and our loan portfolio and everything, we spread all over the place. And I think people think we're a whole lot bigger than we probably are.
That's good.
It is good.
Perception's reality these days. We have turned the tables today on the special edition of On the Money. I'm Mike Sammond, and I'm kind of filling in on the host seat, and we've made the typical host, Joe Moss, the guest today to learn more about Joe and his 2 years of hosting the show On the Money, sponsored by Embassy National Bank. Tell us, I mentioned in one of the intros that I read that you serve the South Asian community.
Correct.
Obviously, that was the plan. Talk about what it is like serving that community, and what are your plans moving forward?
We're going to stick with that niche. But
not that you don't serve anybody else,
right? We help a lot of other people, but that is, that's an area that we started with, and people respect us for what we do and how we understand them, and we like the niche because that demographic they're really good business people, for one. Two, they smart, extremely smart, very family oriented. When they take on a debt obligation, they'll pay you back, and so that's why we like that niche. And I'm surprised that other banks haven't rolled out the red carpet for that. Because if you look at the South Asian community, i.e. the Indians and the people from Pakistan and that area of the world, from a technology standpoint, they're coming over a lot, and very growing community. If you look at transfer payments back, we send $70 billion a year back from the U.S. back to India, for example, and that number just can continue to grow. I'm surprised more banks haven't gotten after this niche.
Yeah, well, what do they say? There's riches and niches.
Riches and niches.
And you found yours, Joe. As far as expansion and growing, in the old days, you would build more brick and mortar banks all over the place. These days, with the internet and technology, you pretty much can serve anywhere. We talked about how you're serving a lot of folks on the East Coast now. You don't need to have that brick and mortar location.
For example, we use a lot of remote check capture systems, which allows you to scan your check and just transmit it to us. We do a lot of online banking where they can submit either a wire transfer request or an ACH request anywhere in the world, and we take care of that. And the only thing we haven't figured out is how to move cash from New York City down to Lawrenceville overnight. So, but we have what we do is we team up with people like Loomis and Brinks, and we have a web system that allows us to make deliveries and take receipts via the internet. So, I mean, if you look at what it costs to build a branch, if you, for example, a good example of PNC in Roswell took over probably spent $1.5 million just for the land over in Roswell. They had to tear down a C-store, a gas station, and they probably built a $4 million building. But I don't ever see any cars there. So I'm not a big branch guy. I think, and I think where technology is going, you'll be able to bank anybody in the world from one location.
Was it 40 years ago when you started in the business? Which I guess you started when you were 12 years old, so congratulations
That's
on
correct.
that.
Yes.
As we like to joke around here. You probably never could have seen 40 years later the technology and how you can deposit a check and take out money without actually being at a branch.
No, in fact, one of my first projects was, I don't know if here in Atlanta there was a bank called First National Bank of Atlanta where I worked, and we introduced Tilly, the all-time teller. So we were the first big ATM bank here in the city in the late 70s. And there was a big conversation about how all the customers are going to be using this. And so we did a lot of work on that. And then came Honest Face, which was the guaranteed check system. So I've been on the kind of the front line of all that all my life, but I never imagined that technology would take over so quickly as it has, to where our whole life is now basically on this telephone.
Yeah. Years ago, I mean, computers would take up rooms larger than this studio, and now you've got 10 times, 100 times that power in your little phone right there.
Yeah, in fact, in the 70s, there was a story about a judge in South Georgia who wanted to get some information out of a borrower, and the borrower refused to cooperate. And so he issued a subpoena, and he told the sheriff to take an axe down to the bank and get all that stuff out of the mainframe. So the thought was, if I take an axe and beat into that mainframe somewhere in there, I'm going to be able to pull out all the paper that is related to this borrower. That was just in the 70s.
It's amazing how things have changed in the banking community. What keeps you in the banking community, by the way? These days, people don't stay at jobs very long.
Well, I've thought about that, but I like helping people. And my particular talent is with financial management. And what better place to try to help people financially than running a bank? So that's where I've come. I'm an entrepreneur, obviously, and I've run small businesses before, but I really getting to a point now in my life where I just really want to do what I'm good at and try to help people. So that's why I'm with the bank.
Well, something you're good at is hosting On the Money.
It's a little bit more difficult on this side of the microphone,
by
the way.
Isn't it? When you're not in control. I hate being interviewed. I understand exactly where you're coming from. But you're an outside-the-box kind of guy. You're also a musician.
I am.
And so, to come do a radio show kind of fits in with your whole persona.
I'm not afraid of the microphone because I've been singing into a microphone for a long, long, long time.
We haven't heard you sing. Well, we have heard you sing actually in one show.
One show, but I don't know if you've ever grabbed a guitar and gotten in front of 200 people all alone by yourself in a microphone. It's hard. It still makes me nervous. So yeah, I kind of learned from that. So I'm really not afraid of the microphone. It doesn't. I don't get nervous, but it does. There's an adrenaline that comes on, but I don't necessarily get nervous.
If people go to the website onthemoney.businessradiox.com, they can take a look and see a whole library of all the shows you've done. Has there been maybe one or two favorite topics that you really enjoy talking about?
Yeah, I enjoy talking about leadership, as you know, and we've had a lot of conversations about leadership and how leadership is so key, even in the smallest organizations and up to the large organizations. You've got to, and it's a skill that is learnable. However, it's not taught, so you have to take those take that on yourself. And it's also a skill that requires tremendous humility to realize that you've got to work on that. So that's why I like talking about leadership. Some of the best leaders out there are the ones that are able to really sit back and say, wait a minute, I'm not doing something right. What is it that I need to do better? And a lot of people have trouble with that. I've always been impressed with healthcare, and the gentleman that we've had on a couple of times talking about the Affordable Care Act and
Keith Knabb,
and how incredibly knowledgeable he was about all the regs and things that people did. I don't like talking about healthcare, but I enjoy talking about Keith because he's so good at what he does. And I think everybody is impressed with people that are passionate and good with what they do. Let's see, planning. I like to talk about planning. I like to talk about technology, and the reason is those two go hand in hand. In today's world, you've got to be able to recreate your business almost daily based on things that occur in technology and in the economy. And so it requires you to be really light on your feet and be able to make change quickly. There are a lot of people that I've talked to that I can't name them all, but, I've learned something from every single one of them.
Well, and I was going to add that as we, again, you're listening to On the Money, and we've turned the tables. The host, Joe Moss, is the guest today. And like you just said, every show, as your producer, as one of your producers over the last couple of years, I feel like I take away something from every single show. You'll have another person come on to talk about leadership, and I'm thinking, we've already had 4 or 5 people talk about leadership, but they'll bring something to the table that one of the other speakers had not brought to the table.
Sure. And we make a good team, Mike, you and me, because you tend to, now that you kind of know what I want to do with this, you find the right guests to bring in. And our guests are counseled before we go on air. We tell them, look, this show isn't about you. This show is about sharing what you've learned. And when people hear that, I tell them, you get a little bit of publicity up front, that type of thing, but we're more interested in you sharing what you've learned for other small businesses. And I've been really pleased the way the guests have opened up that way.
They can't all be all-stars, though, Joe. I know there's probably been a few duds in there. We won't name any names, but I guess it happens once in a while. I'm sure there's probably been shows where the 30, 45 minutes goes by like that. It's over with. And then there's probably some shows where you're 10 minutes in and you're like, oh, my God, I can't even probably get 20 minutes out of this guy.
Well, I honestly tell you, I think that there was just one that I remember, and I would,
mostly hits, once in a while a miss.
Yeah, as you know, I ask a question and I have follow up and I'm able to get people to talk and they feel comfortable talking. But one gentleman, we would ask a question, as you recall, and that he would answer yes or no, and it was like pulling words out of his mouth, but we got through it. He started getting more comfortable, and we got through it.
As we wrap up this conversation, because I don't want to keep you in the hot seat too long, because I know it's uncomfortable in a way for you, but you're getting a taste of what it's like for your guests sometimes. But you do make them feel at ease, because I told you this from the first show, Joe. I said, wow, you're like a natural at this, and I wasn't just blowing smoke. You've put a lot of your guests at ease. It seems like this is something, and I get it, it probably goes back to your musical background, but you just seem a natural in front of the microphone that maybe this is something you should have been doing years ago.
Well, it's as you know, with music, it's really tough to try to make a living doing that. If I had my choice, I'd be writing music and performing, but years ago I chose to take the route that I did, and I'm glad that I have, although I do keep up with the music and the songwriting and things like that. That's a really good outlet for me. I just enjoy talking to people. I like my dad. My dad always knew how to ask questions, and he listened extremely well. And I think I picked up on that. He wasn't one to spend a lot of time talking about himself or anything. He was the one. I always go to a party with him or at church or whatever, and he's always asking people questions. And I think that's where I picked it up. because that's where you learn, is when you start asking people what's going on with them, and then you listen. That's how you learn.
So moving forward, what are the plans for On the Money? Where do you see the show going?
That's a very good question. I've been thinking about that. I would like to be able to spend a little bit of money to let this touch more and more ears, because I think it's a little secret that's hasn't been spread out too much. And I think the more and more people listen to it, the more they're going to understand what Embassy is all about. And, quite frankly, I think that if you listen to people on the radio that have done all this, I don't know that there's a show necessarily like this. Most of the radio shows and everything I hear is all about that person, and they develop a personality of their own.
And they become bigger than the subject matter.
They become bigger than subject matter, and what we're trying to do is keep the subject matter, what people listen to, not necessarily the moderator or the guest. And I think people need to hear that a lot more than some of the stuff I hear now.
Well, we know people are listening. We've seen our numbers recently, so congratulations on all the success of On the Money.
I was surprised. We know that because of the work that you've done, we know that each of our shows, whether it be when people, as we're airing it now, or as we distribute it through email, or people Google it or whatever, each of our shows is listened up to 20,000 times, which is, I heard that number and I thought that's a big number, but my son-in-law is in this business, and he does a lot of sound production, and he says, well, when you get up to about 1 million listeners, then that's when people are going to start taking you seriously. So,
all of a sudden, 20,000 didn't seem like a whole lot.
So it's big to me, and so who knows? We may end up getting there at some point.
What kind of reaction are you getting from the bank's board and from customers? What are you hearing out there on the streets regarding your show?
Well, I'm getting good response because they're getting good response, and they hear our customers hear things that they like, and then they pass that back, and then we have people that we never would have gotten in touch with that have come into the bank saying, I heard about Embassy National Bank. One guy came in and said, I want to apply for a loan. I heard Embassy is really proud of what they do for small business. So when he said that unprompted, I thought, well, obviously he's heard something. So I think it's been a real I think everybody's happy with the show, and I think it has really been a good outreach for us.
Well, Joe, congratulations again on the show, On the Money, here on Business Radio X. It's been a real pleasure, being your producer over the last couple of years. I've had the pleasure of working with some great folks, and you're right there at the top of the list. So thank you for your support of Business Radio X and allowing us to kind of be your partner to help you reach the goals that you've been talking about, that you want to help those small business people out there and to support the business community through Embassy National Bank.
Yeah, Business Radio X is a great platform. It provides a lot of things that we couldn't provide ourselves, such as the studio, such as you finding guests, but also the publicity through the marketing that you do through your own website. And so it's been, it's a great platform. It really is.
All those businesses out there, you hear what Joe said? We're going to use that little snippet if you don't.
Yeah, I got a call the other day from an AM radio station, wanted me to come on for a half hour and wanted to charge me. I thought it was a pretty significant number. And I thought, the podcast is actually a lot more powerful than an AM radio station these days.
Yeah. I would agree completely.
That's just tells you something about technology. In the old days, oh man, he's on the radio, man. That's huge. Now it's, why didn't he just do a podcast? So
you have a little bit more control over a lot of things when it's your podcast.
Yeah, and you can send it to who you want to send it to.
All right, Joe. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and next week we'll continue on. Our guest next week is about the gentleman that has a leadership company, and he's used to run bands.
He's a musician, and he uses what he learned in the music industry to help companies get the most out of their employees. So that, again, a very unique guest, but should be a fun show.
Yeah, and bands, by the way, typically they have to work together, as you know, to be good. And
gotta be on the same page.
And and as much as we like to think they're party people and all that, all the musicians I know, extremely disciplined people. They're on time all the time. If you think that playing 4 hours of music's not a big deal, they are worn out by the end of the evening, and and they have to please as many people as they can. So I can't wait for next week's show.
All right, Joe, let's do this again in 2 years.
We'll do that.
All right. That's our show for today. For Joe Moss, I'm Mike Sammond. This has been On the Money, the #1 small business show on Business Radio X. On the Money is brought to you by Embassy National Bank. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at @on_the_money and then the #1. You can listen to any of our shows anytime by going to onthemoney.businessradiox.com. You can also download any of the episodes on iTunes. Also, you can watch many of these shows on our Business Radio X-Gwinnett YouTube channel. Until next time, I'm Mike Sammond for Joe Moss, and you have these little things that you like to say at the end of the show. Why did you decide to do that?
Those are things that I've learned from successful people that have, you learn more from people's mistakes than you do their successes. So these are little things that I've heard from people that have fallen on bad times, but now they're successful. And, we use them. Be careful out there. It's a very tough environment. People are out there to get your money. Be careful of who, what they're selling, etc. Big one, leave fear in the back seat.
You've been saying that for about a year and a half now.
Oh, man, that's the biggest thing. And someone who goes out and mortgages his house, puts everything on the line to open up a small business, that's someone that has put fear in the back seat. And the #1 emotion that probably keeps us from being all that we can be is fear. So keep fear in the back seat. And then most importantly, we call it stay authentic. Just don't forget who you are. And stay authentic, stay humble. Realize that, you got to keep learning every day, and just be yourself.
And anybody who listens to this show, they know that Joe Moss is authentic. All right, Joe, we'll see you next time, and we'll see all of you next time right here on the Money.
Thank you.